Hello friends and welcome to my channel. I love to explore my heritage through my crafts, and the warm summer glazed terrace we have tempted me to start another weaving project. My mother told me that my grandmother used to do Karelian Red Pickup Weaving in the 1940s. After some digging, one of my aunts found these lovely table runners made by her. This style of weaving has been popular in eastern Finland and Karelia. It was used in towels, table runners, and even in these chemise I found. Traditionally red was the color used, but nothing prevents one using any other color to weave the pattern. I ordered white and red heckled flax yarn. The base weave is made out of white yarn and the red is used for the pattern. The red was lighter weight, so I decided to use it doubled. I had already woven a few meters of white to another project before starting this table runner. However, after doing way too much math, I realized that centering the pattern was easiest if I removed 2 warp yarns from one side to have a total of 350 warp yarns. And luckily this was easy. I had doubled the edgemost yarns, so to continue doing it, I moved one of the heddles to the other heddle bar. The red pickup pattern is constructed on a rectangular grid. Depending on the fabric density, the square size can vary, but for this yarn, 2 yarns made a good base for the grid. My 350 warp yarns thus gave me a grid that is 175 squares wide. Having an odd number of squares makes it easier to center patterns like this. All the patterns have vertical symmetry. This allows the weaver to store the pickup pattern behind the heddles and retrieve the shed later when needed. This makes weaving so much faster if one were to pick up every single row. I found an old book with different traditional patterns. I chose one narrow pattern and one wider one for this table runner.
So, what tools I made? I had these pieces of wood that were left over from my old loom, and I cut these into pieces. I made 1/2 meter pieces which have little holes in one end, lots of these, and I made one pickup tool which has a sharp end, and this is used to pick threads to make a pattern.
Let's start patterning. I have my warp yarns leveled, and using the pickup tool, I pick warp pairs that correspond to the white parts of the pattern. As my reed comb has 2 warp yarns in each slit, it is quite easy to keep track of yarn pairs. Now that I have all the white barbs on my stick, I turn the stick sideways to open the shed. It would be better if my tool was slightly wider, but this still works. This double shuttle allows me to double my red yarn easily. Now that I have the pattern picked up, I don't want to lose it since I have to weave this same row 3 more times. Now I take my pattern stick and place it into the shed behind the heddles. This turned out to be a bit tricky without moving from my seat. I finally realized that it was better to do it from the side so that I did not miss any of the warps. Now I need to move the pattern stick further back so that the regular shed can open. Next, I'm adding the white background weft. Now, I need to repeat the previous row. Now I can use the handy pattern stick I added earlier. I can take the stick and move it close to the reed comb. By turning the stick sideways, the pattern shed is opened. However, I'm still at the learning stage, so I didn't move my stick close enough to the reed comb. Therefore, I needed to use my pickup tool to widen the shed. It did work, but I later found it unnecessary. With the second pattern row, I realized that I could use my shuttle to widen the shed while I placed the pattern stick behind the heddles. And again, it is time to add the background weft. Now I pass the center, and I can remove the pattern sticks as I go through the symmetrical pattern. After a couple of rounds of ground weave, I start the second, more complicated pattern. First, the pattern felt complicated and scary, but I found out that it was quite easy to pick up. the back of the loom starts filling out. If my pattern was any wider, I would have to thread cord through the holes in my pattern sticks and replace some of them with cord. I have finally learned the quick way to use my pattern sticks. With the stick directly behind the reed gum, I can thread my red saddle through the shed with no problems. I finally get into a good rhythm. Move the pattern stick forward, weave the pattern, move the pattern stick back, beat. Open the shed and weave the background, and so on. I have to watch for the edges so that I don't end up with weft loops or tight spots. Doesn't have any pattern, so here I can relax and try to pick up speed. One of my warp yarns broke. This is probably due to the fact that I have some unnecessary twist in my warp. Luckily, it is easy to replace the broken warp. Now I'll weave the same pattern rows to the other end of the table runner. weave a bit extra to the end of the tape runner to use all of the warp. Is done. I first cut out some of the warps and tie them into knots to prevent any unraveling. And this is really not that necessary as I already wove extra, but I did it anyway. Now I can just cut the warp and release my fabric. Now I need to weave in all the yarn ends. I washed the fabric by hand in 60 degrees. I added salt and several color catcher sheets and detergent, and the red color didn't bleed. Now I only need to hem the ends. This pull thread hem is what was traditionally used in textiles like this. I have used the method on a linen apron, so the technique was not new to me. First you need to remove 2 or 3 threads from the fabric. I used linen thread that I waxed with beeswax to prevent it from breaking. I hide the end to the inside of the hem. Then I start making the hem. I take 2 threads on my needle and pull the needle through. Then I take the same 2 threads and a thread from the hem fold. I pull the needle through. This bunches the threads in pairs and creates this ladder-like finish. I finish the folded edge with a few stitches and then turn to go back towards the beginning. The second edge goes faster as I don't have to worry about the fold. I just stick my needle through the edgemost thread. I don't have much thread left, but I can just finish the edge of the fold and then bind off with a few back stitches. And here is the finished table runner. Thank you for watching and see you soon on another video. Bye!